Welcome to Tech Primers. In this session, we are going to see how to use EhCache in conjugation with Spring Cache in a Spring Boot application. So let's go through our usual project creation. So let's go to start.spring.io. So what I have done is I've created a new project with com tech primers cache with the project name as Spring EhCache example, and also I have added the dependencies as cache, h2, jpa, and web. So I have already generated this project and opened in IntelliJ. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use JPAs to load the data from the database in a Spring Boot application. However, I'm going to use the EhCache which Spring provides to abstract out the caching mechanism so that we don't have to go to the database every time. So let's do that. So what I will do is I'll create a configuration for EhCache first. So I'm creating a file called EhCache configuration. So I'm going to annotate this with configuration so that Spring Boot automatically identifies during auto configuration. So we need a bean which is nothing but a cache manager. So Spring has given a cache manager for us, and let's say cache manager. So what I'm going to return is I'm going to create a new EhCache cache manager. Okay, for that we need a cache manager factory. So let's create this as another method. So that cache manager factory. So what I'm going to do is cache manager factory bean. Okay, so this is what we need. So we need a cache manager factory bean and get an object out of it. That will be a cache manager. So these are provided by Spring. Okay, so Spring provides an abstraction to the EhCache, so you don't have to extend the EhCache. Spring Cache provides something called EhCache Manager, so we can directly use that EhCache Manager to create a cache manager. So that is what we are doing here. So this provides a EhCache Manager to the cache manager of Spring. Okay, and also we have to say enable caching. So this will enable caching for Spring using Spring, and it will use the EhCache Manager, which is the EhCache. So we need to create a bean, factory bean. And assign some properties. So we are going to give a config property. So we need to give the config property location. So this is the only thing required for the EhCache to work. So EhCache.xml that we are going to provide, and then I'll say set shared as true so that we can share the cache. So I need to return the bean. Okay, so what we have done here is we have created a cache manager with the EhCache Manager instance. So Spring provides lots of other caches, but in this particular example, we are going to see EhCache. So to create the cache manager, we need a factory bean where we are setting different properties to that particular cache manager and creating that particular cache manager. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a resource. So let's consider our usual example users resource. So this will be a REST endpoint. With rest/search, and we will have a REST endpoint to return a particular user. So I'll have a path variable, file string name. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask the user to provide the name of the user so that we can return the user. So what we are going to do here is we are going to create a cache via which we will access using the JPA repository. So get user and we'll provide the name. Okay, so what we need to do is let's create the model. So users is the model, so I'll create the model. So this should follow the JP entity. This if JP entity will use this, so I'll mark this as entity, and I'll create some fields. I'll create a ID field. I'll mark this as ID, and I'll mark it as generated value. So this Spring JPA can generate automatic primary ID. So next I'll create some other fields. So what I've done is I've created ID, name, team name, salary. Okay, so we need some constructors. So Spring JPA needs an empty constructor. Then we'll create some constructors with these three values so that we can populate it. Also we need the getters and setters, so let's generate the getters and setters as well. Okay, so I also override the toString so that we can print this object and see when we are returning. Okay, so I've just added a toString, getters and setters, two constructors, and I've added it with entity. So now what else we need for the resource? So we need a user cache. Let's name it as users cache. Okay, so I'll create this particular class. So what I'll do is I'll auto wire this here. So I'll create this class under a package called cache. I'll annotate it with component, our usual Spring notation. So here what I will do, I'll have to create the method which we need here, right? So I'll go ahead and create this method. Now I'm going to annotate this particular method as cacheable, and I'm going to say that name this particular cache as users cache. Also I'm going to say the key for my cache would be name. So we need to provide a key for the cache so that we can take the data out of the cache. So we need to provide a key, and I'm going to say name. So here what we are going to do is we are going to use the repository to get the data. So we don't have the repository yet. Let's create the repository. So I'll use repository package to create the users repository. I'll extend it from the JPA repository. So if you're not familiar with the Spring JPA, so I have done a video about Spring JPA and REST, so you can take a look at that if you're not comfortable with JPA. Okay, so that is what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do here is let's create some log here, retrieving from database, so that we know name. We know this particular method is getting hit. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say users repository dot find by name. So we need to find by a particular field, right? So we can create that using find by name. So I'm going to create this method and provide the string name. So JPA is automatically going to give me the user from that for that particular name. Sorry, I had my mobile. Okay. So what I have done is I'm using the users cache to get the users. So inside the users cache, I've auto wired. I'm doing a caching. Okay, I think that's it. What else do we need? So one part what we need is the ehcache.xml, whatever we have put here. So I'm going to create the ehcache.xml. ehcache.xml. So I have that already created in another project here. Let me copy this guy. Okay, so I'll tell you what does it do. So this is the EhCache which is required for EhCache to create or use it at runtime. So what we are going to do is we are going to give the disk storage. So what I've done is I have done the temp store. I have just given the temp store for the disk storage. For the caching, I have mentioned that what is the cache name which I'm going to use. So users cache is the cache name which we are using, right? So let me check users cache. Yeah, so users cache is the cache name which I give. Also these are different configurations which you give for the EhCache to create the cache using the disk store which is available here. Okay, so that's it. What else do we need? I think we have to enable the JPA repository. So I need to enable the JPA repository here. Base packages. I need to give the base packages com tech primers dot cache dot repository. So that is where our JPA repository is, right? Yeah. I think that is it. Okay, let's start this particular project. So I started the Spring Boot project. So let it load up. So once it is loaded, we can hit the rest slash search slash the. Okay, we haven't provided the user's name at all, right? So we haven't loaded the data into the database. So let me load that. Also, I'm getting some error here. Where is the error? Okay, let's see that later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load. I'm going to write a loader. So that will load the data into the H2 database. So we have added the H2 dependency, right? So we need to load the data into the database. So I'm going to write a post construct. Okay, so I'm going to use the same JP repository. I'm going to auto the users repository. To save the values, users list. So I need a users list. So I need the list of users which I can store. So I'm going to create a dummy. Okay, so I'm going to insert two records, Ajay and Jaga, with the same tech, and I'll just change the salary. Okay, so this is the dummy data which we are going to provide to the JPA repository, so that when the Spring Boot application loads, it is inserted into the H2 database. So this will be inserted into the H2 database so that it will be available before we get the data via the cache. So before that, we need to have the cache manager. So we haven't added the EhCache, right? In the form.xml, if you see, we have added the Spring Boot starter Spring Boot cache, Spring JPA, the Spring starter JPA. Then we have added the web. We have added H2. We haven't added the dependency for the EhCache. So I'll add the dependency for EhCache. Okay. So it's going to be net.sf.ehcache, and the version which I am using is 2.0. Okay, so I'll just say import changes. So this is going to have the EhCache as well for us. So let's start the application. I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't make any other mistake. So we enable the JPA repository, enable caching. In the loaders we have loaded the data here. Model we have created. So we have a JPA repository, and then finally we have a resource via which we are going to use the cache. Okay, so let's see if the application comes up. Users cache required. Okay, repository that could not be found. So let me check what is the problem. So it's saying users cache, user repository in users cache required a bean of type users repository that could not be found. Why is it not able to find it? I have made it component class, and if you see the users repository, it's an interface which is extending the JPA repository, right? And then okay, so I have auto wired it. And why is it saying consider defining a bean of type users repository? new configuration. So I think that is what we have provided here, right? Okay, what is the okay, I think I have the repository package name as a typo, so that is why the Spring Boot application is not able to identify the JPA repository. So let's start this guy again. So let me check again. Contact primers cache repository, is that right? Yeah, hopefully it should work this time. Cannot open EhCache.xml. There's another typo again, and okay, I think I need to work on my typing skills. So I'll rename this guy EhCache again and then start. Okay, the Spring Boot application is up now. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to hit the REST endpoint, local host rest slash users slash, let's type Ajay. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to let's, why is it I made it rest slash search, did I? Okay, I was doing lots of search videos, that is why I think I made search. Never mind, but yeah. So what we have got here is the data. So how did it get? That's what we are going to see here. Okay, it's saying we need a serializable users object. Okay, let me serialize this and I'll. Okay, I should have done that. Implement serializable. I should have serialized that long back, but yeah, let me fix this guy as well. Okay, I'll restart the application so that we have a neat GitHub project so that you can use as well, for example. Okay, the Spring Boot application has come up. Let me go again and hit the search. Now we need to search this under users. Okay, hopefully this time it did not fail. Yeah, so if you see here, this particular hit is getting the data from the database. So first time the cache did not have any value, so it came inside this particular method and it retrieved the data from the database. Now let me hit the refresh it again. So what I'm doing is I'm hitting the rest point again and again. If you see here, it's not going to the database, so it's getting the data from the cache directly. However, if let's say if I search for the next user, it will go to the database. Yeah, it has gone to the database, but the subsequent calls will not go to the database because it is cached already in the EhCache. Okay, so that is how Spring uses the EhCache. So if you see here what we have done, I'll reiterate what we have done here. So initially we have to create a cache manager, which is Spring Cache Manager. Spring internally has different cache managers. One of that is EhCache Manager. So we are using EhCache Manager, and we are relying on the Spring Cache. So we need to add the we need to enable caching, which is the Spring caching, and then we have to create the cache manager, and we have to provide the configurations using the EhCache Manager factory B. Okay, once that is done, we can annotate the method where we have the data into a cacheable annotation. So we just mark it as cacheable, and then we say what is our cache name, and we provide the key, what is the key for that particular cache. So in the configuration, when we loaded the EhCache configuration, we need to provide the same cache details here. We have to provide the same cache name so that we can have different type of caches with different properties. So that is the idea for this particular tab. Okay, so once that is done, I have loaded the data into the H2 database using the JPA here. So I've just written a post construct using which I am loading the data. Using the same JPA repository, I'll retrieve the data in the users cache here. Okay, so I have exposed the resources, users resource, so that we can get the data from the cache from the REST endpoint. So I just have a rest slash user slash name. So using that particular REST endpoint, we go to the database or the cache and get the data. And we have seen that for the first time it goes to the database. The next time it directly gets the data from the cache instead of going to the database. So that is the example for EhCache inside a Spring Boot application. So that's it for this video. Meet you again in the next video. Thank you.